also your campus. It's very nice and open and creative. So today I want to present a lot of information to you. Since it took me 15 hours to come to your place, I thought I have to deliver a lot of information. As you already said, the presentation is basically split into two parts. The first part is about certification systems, the German system and the Vietnamese system, and in the second part I would like to be more down to earth, so more practical oriented, and I will show you a project we are working on in Saigon. This is an image of Saigon, or as we also know as Ho Chi Minh City, the mega city region in Southeast Asia. I will talk about that more. So first I give you an introduction about the two certification systems. Secondly, I will talk about the urban challenges of Ho Chi Minh City. And I will talk later under point 3 about the research project as a whole, and then later dive into a very detailed, practical, down-to-earth project. The project is funded by the German government and is coordinated by a university in the far east of Germany called BTU Cottbus. And in my work package I work together, so I'm from Technical University Darmstadt, which is close to Frankfurt, but I also work together with some people from Braunschweig and Hamburg University. So in my team I'm the architect and urban designer, and I also work with an energy engineer and a geographer. But let me first start with the two certification systems that I want to show you today. The first certification system, the green building system in Germany, is basically based on a long tradition in Germany. As you can see, people started to think about energy efficiency and green building already in the 70s. Maybe they don't even knew and use the word green building, but still they had like different stages of development over the course of the year. So maybe here I want to make it very simple and clear. In Germany we don't have the problem with air conditioning, we have the problem with heating, obviously. But at the end of the day, it's almost the same in energy consumption. So you can transfer this information to your country as well. Imagine 1 square meter of your house. So 1 square meter. And think about 35 bottles of Coca-Cola filled with oil. So this might be half a liter, just double this and fill it with oil. Each square meter in the house needs 35 liters each year, each square meter, which is an enormous amount of energy people use for normal houses. So this used to be in the 70s. And nowadays, due to new technology, new ideas, new knowledge, it's possible to do the same with 4 liters, either oil or gas, whatever. So it's an enormous reduction from 350 kilowatt hours per square meter a year to maybe 40 or 50. This took a long time. However, we do not have the time in Vietnam, or we do not have the time in Colombia to do the same. We have to speed up. We have to do it within a very short period of maybe 5, 10 or 15 years. Okay, so with this in the back, I want to talk to you about the German green building certification system, which has been established around 2009. which is basically a certification system of the second generation. Once again, the history is very long in Germany, but having this certification system like this, like LEED or BREEAM, what we have seen this morning, is a little bit newer than LEED, because we already had different systems already, like the German industry norm theme. However, today I'm going to talk about the German Green Building System, which is basically, as I said, a little bit different from that what we have seen today, because it has a maybe more, I think so, holistic approach. So it covers all key aspects of sustainable building: environmental quality, economic quality, socio-cultural and functional quality, technical quality, process quality, and it also says something about the site quality. Second, the certification system can be applied internationally. That's why I also show you this case study from Saigon. And also very important in our case is that it's always based on the entire life cycle of the building. Which means it starts from the material which are used to build the house. It's all about the operation of the house, and it's also about the recycling of the house. Which is hard for an architect, but that's life. One day your project will be demolished. These things are measured like this. Ecological quality is about 22.5%, economical quality the same, socio-cultural quality is the same, technical quality and the quality of the process is about 10%. But more about that in a second. The ecological quality is about the impact on the global, but as well on the local level. And it's about the resources, the materials, and also about the waste of the projects and the materials. And here you see a more detailed overview, which is the first level of entering into the system. So, for instance, what is the global impact and the local impact on the environment? Then you dive into the next level, which you can see here, which is about economic quality. And these things, so this might be a little bit overwhelming, but just give me 1 second about. So we are talking about environmental quality and economic quality, these two things. And for instance, how does the ranking system work? Because it's important. How do you get points? How does it actually bring all this information together? We have first a life cycle impact assessment, a local environmental impact, responsible procurement, life cycle assessment, primary energy, then it's about water demand and wastewater volume, and land use. And secondly, which is also different from other certification systems, the economic level is similar important as the other ones. So it's about the life cycle costs and the flexibility and adaptation, and especially about the commercial viability. So this means it's not only about how you produce a building, it's also about how you run a building and also how you market a building, which is a market asset, as we also can see from this morning's presentation. The third aspect is socio-cultural functional quality. These things are about health, comfort, function and design. So you measure the thermal comfort in the winter, the comfort in the summer. Then you get points for the hygiene, for the acoustics, for the visual comfort. How is the free project? and so on. What about the bicycle? Accessibility to public transportation. So all these things come together and are ranked within these systems. So it's a very holistic approach. And then you see how many points you get. And these things are differently. I don't have to go into this detail, but I just wanted to tell you, like, some things are more important than others. Thermal comfort gets 5 points and is ranked by 4.3% as a whole. Cake, whereas other things are less important because they are maybe not so relevant within the overall context. Of course, the technical quality, which used to be basically the focus of the early certification systems. For good reasons, yes. But nowadays we think more holistic when we talk about sustainability. And the quality of the process, which is also new. It's not easy to value or easy to measure, but it's really important when you think about, like, how do I produce an energy and climate efficient sustainable building. It not only starts when you build, it starts when you already think about it for the first time. And these issues are also measured and judged. The quality of the project preparation. Integral planning, which means holistic planning. So from a very early stage, you work together as an architect or interior designer with an acoustic engineer or energy engineer, a physician, or with someone who is a market developer. So all these things, all these people come together and create a team. Of course, they speak different languages, but to learn this is basically one of the most important challenges for you when you're going to design later. So don't be a kind of autistic students and designers who want to design a great building. I want to become a star architect and all these things, which is nice. You all will be star architects, of course, everyone wants to be, but it's really important to understand the language of the other disciplines which deal about sustainable design. So how do I understand? Do I really understand the place where I built my house? What's the sun orientation? Where's the wind coming from? What about the vegetation? What about the rain? What about the flooding? And all these things are so important when you start to think about a project. This is what I just said, the site quality. The site quality in itself doesn't get points because it goes into the economic quality of your measurement. For instance, the site quality, the local environment, the public image and the social conditions of the place. Some things we have been seen yesterday during the presentations when we saw projects about Hamburg or Frankfurt or Vienna. What about the access to transportation and also the access to amenities and cultural institutions? All these things are basically judged in a whole view into this certification system. And with this, basically, you end up with a diagram like this, where you have like the different things: environmental, economic, socio-cultural, technical and process qualities. And all these things you see perform in a different way. Here, for instance, I don't know, I can't read it, but at this point it didn't perform well. Another, it performed quite well. So in the end, this project gained 67.5%, which means that it's between 65 and 80%, so it's basically silver. You can get bronze, silver and gold. maybe before I come to Lotus, a few more things about how the process works. So it's important to know that there are always three parties, not only two, to avoid manipulation or even corruption. So there is, of course, DGNB as a big institution, but you can't go there and say, this is my house, so please certify it, and I want to have gold, and I pay for it. No, you have to choose a so-called auditor. So a guy, he's independent, he's objective. And he's also not paid by you. You pay the money to DGNB, and this guy is totally independent and objective and certifies your project according to all these different points you just saw. You send it there, you get a first feedback, and they tell you, okay, it makes sense, or it doesn't even make sense. If you don't reach bronze, so why should you do it? But if you go further, then you deliver all the information, and then basically at the end, the first step maybe takes 4 weeks, and at the end of 8 weeks, you have the result, and then they will hand over to you, hopefully, the golden certification. Maybe about the costs and benefits. They say that this process of certification takes about 0.5% of your building costs. On the other side, they say it's worth at least 3 to 5% of your, let's say, extra income when you rent it or you sell it, at least. If it's worth to do it, it's always in the hand of the developer or private person, whoever. But there is a certain tendency in Europe or in Germany as well that it's getting more and more difficult to rent space of office buildings, for instance, if they are not certified, if they don't have a certification. So let's say an international company like Sony or whatever comes to Hamburg, they probably would ask you for a certification when they rent an office building. Okay, now I would like to talk about Lotus. Lotus is another certification system. In the morning we saw that there are many, and this is again one more which probably makes sense. And it's basically under the umbrella of the Vietnam Green Building Council, and it has similar stages like all the certification systems. So I don't have to go into this timeline. You hand it in, you get a feedback, you hand it again in, and you have a feedback, and at the end of the day you have a certification, or maybe not. I show it to you because it has a different structure. The first one is about energy. It's a little bit closer to the house, so maybe later in the discussion I would like to debate with you which system you prefer, or which system you think is not better or worse or whatever, but what's the benefit or what's not so good about the different systems. Because it's all about like finding the right system for your country, so you can study from the systems. Energy in Vietnam is a very important issue, because you have sometimes during the day suddenly a cut-off. You don't have energy anymore for 1 hour, because the mega city of Saigon, like with 12 million people, has totally different peaks or low points of energy consumption during the course of the day. So the consumption of energy, and especially the development of energy consumption, is quite dramatic. Until 2025, the demand will triple, and 8 times the amount of electricity will be needed. So where's the energy coming from? And the system is interesting because it's basically, if you want to be ranked, it should be very easy to reach. And then you get extra points for each % of reduction, which is up to 55%. And Another issue is natural ventilation. In a tropical country, natural ventilation is absolutely crucial. So 30% of the net occupied area are naturally ventilated, at least, or 80% of net occupied areas are naturally ventilated, which is much better. I will come back to this point later when I show you the case study. But of course, the reduction of air condition is a very important point. Artificial light, hot water, how to use renewable energy, and the peak electricity demand. So you think about all the technical instruments you are using within the house. The second point is about water, also an important point. The basic criteria is that you at least consume 20% less than before or reference project. The second point is about water recycling and water reuse. At least 10%, or you get an extra percent or an extra point but for each percent up to 30%. Rainwater harvesting, also important. Water efficiency in landscaping. And there you can suddenly see they don't even start with 10% or something like this. No, they go right into 75% because they know that there's an enormous waste of water people use for watering landscape, which doesn't make sense. I mean, we know this from California or something, that it's almost sometimes forbidden to use that. And you can make it much more efficient. And of course, water monitoring. So how do you control, how do you measure the consumption of water where you need it, or is it just wasted into the sky? Health and comfort is important. I don't want to go into all these things, but how do people, how do they behave, how do they live in the house over the course of the day and the night? What's the indoor quality, the air inside? Are there pollutions? Is there too much CO2? What about the daylight? What about the visual comfort and external views? And you see already, compared to what I've said before to the German system, there are similarities in the approach. Adaptation and mitigation. In this context of Southeast Asia is extremely important. I do not know enough about Colombia right now, but maybe we can talk about that later. So what about natural disaster, natural problems because of wind and water? So adaptation and mitigation is an important issue. Because to a certain degree, mitigation doesn't work anymore. It's almost too late. You have to adapt yourself to a changing climate. The community issue is interestingly incorporated into the Lotus, which I like and appreciate a lot. So what about the public space, the quality of public space? Are there local jobs? As I said to you earlier this morning, Vietnamese people live on the streets if they can, in the traditional neighborhoods. That's their lifestyle, they love that. Management, judged with 9% of the whole. So, again, if you have been certified 4 as an existing building, then you can build on top of this. How is it managed, how is it monitored? And if you might fail in 1 or 2 points totally, who knows? You have the possibility to raise you up again if you have special innovations. So you can get extra points, up to 6% bonus, if you have special, smart, intelligent ideas that you introduced into your project. So these are basically all the ideas. And with this diagram I would like to show you that still as we saw in the morning, or as we have it in Germany, or as it is here, all these systems are constantly restored. So in this diagram I just want to show you that they might get rid of these three categories: ecology, adaptation and mitigation, and the community, and press it into one module called site. We can talk about it later. So why do I say this? Because at the end of the day we always have to ask ourselves, who are all these certification systems made for? Or is it just above all our heads? Is it just a tool for some developers who want to raise their benefit? Is the environment really better off because of certification systems which pop all out of the earth all over the place? That's the big question. To me at least. Okay. So as I said, I basically brought two presentations which I tried to stitch together with you. Now I would like to talk about the project, with the so-called megacity project in Ho Chi Minh City. And first I would like to tell you about the urban challenges in Saigon. I'm sorry, maybe it's confusing, but we somehow still say Saigon. It's not so in our heads to say Ho Chi Minh City, so please apologize. Then I talk about the Megacity Research Project, and I give you a glimpse about what I actually work on exactly, which is basically architecture. That's why it could be interesting for you. However, the Megacity Research Project has more cities. The Megacity Research Project is the most prominent research project we have in urban development in Germany. It's right below our Chancellor. And basically, yeah, she really comes to the conferences sometimes. So the green issue, urban development, sustainable cities, it's really high on the agenda of our government. So this makes it quite interesting for us to work on it. And there was a first phase with many different cities all over the place. However, these cities, I think it's around 10 or something, have left over. And one city is our city, and we are working on energy efficiency. I'm not so deep into all the project of my colleagues, but I think, as I remember, in Lima, they mainly research about water, which is a very important issue there. In Casablanca, they research about urban agriculture. In Addis, they research about waste management. In Urumqi, it's also about energy efficiency. In Hyderabad, it's about urban management. And we are, as I said, about energy and climate efficiency. Vietnam is in Southeast Asia. Ho Chi Minh City is here. The center, let's say the most important economic engine in Southeast Asia, in the ASEAN region. However, on the other side, you see that the country has an extreme shape, which makes it as one of the 5 most vulnerable countries in the whole world. It's because of its topography and geography, because of its coastline. Speaking more extreme, it might happen that most of some countries, of some areas, for instance the Mekong Delta, might disappear in 50 years. So what can we do about this today? Can we still do something? Or is this the sea eating the country? On the other hand, the country is growing and growing. Like, as you can see here, in the center of the 70s, there used to live 48 million people. Nowadays, there are like between around 90 million people, the same size we have in Germany. But still, in Germany, society is shrinking, and here the society is growing extremely. So these people need space. Where do they live? Where do they build their houses? This is an aerial, and now I show you an interesting effect. I'm sorry, now I show you an interesting effect. So just an overview, so this is District 1, called Saigon still, and then all the other districts have been growing around. Let me go back for a second, maybe you focus on District 1. And you see, of course, when they started to build the city, they settled on safe land, which was approximately 35 meters above sea level. That's how they started, until the 1950s, when the city was like 500,000 people. And then the direction still went into safe grounds, until 2005. And with the boom of globalization, people start to go into the south, into a very dangerous area, a very dangerous landscape, into the wetlands, almost sea level. But there is no way to stop this process. You can say, as a German researcher, well, people, you know what? I'm out of that game, that's stupid. They don't care. Who are you? You have to enter this game, and you have to try to do the best. At least something. Once or twice a year, you have a situation like this. And you might say it's normal, but it's not normal. Because the world is changing. And we have to understand that the world is changing, and that we have to mitigate and adapt to the changing world. Flooding is an important issue, as I just said. But at the same time, heat is an enormous problem, and especially the so-called urban heat island effect. It's already very hot there. Like today, like here, you have like 30 degrees or something, which is quite hot. But in some places, especially in the inner city area, because everything is concrete and sealed, no green almost, it's up to 10 degrees more than it should be, 40 degrees, and it's impossible to live there. Okay, now I would like to talk a little bit about a research project which is a little piece of trying to change or to stimulate change in how the city is dealing with these big problems. The overall aim of this big project is about developing and implementing strategies for mitigation and adaptation, urban land and urban structures to climate change. Detailed aims are reducing the risk, reducing the vulnerability. So there are hard facts. Each year people are dying because of climate change and typhoons. So how do we develop tools and methods? How do we evaluate technologies? How can we improve governance and planning? How can we raise the awareness? People have to understand that there might be a problem. How do we build up the capacity? And maybe we can develop some pilot projects in order to show different alternatives. Okay, it's overwhelming, I know. All I want to say is that there are two action fields within the research project. Action field 1 is basically the foundation. So there are scientists who generate information because you know from your classes that you cannot really rely and trust diagrams or maps. For sure, maps about Saigon South are wrong, because they are developed by developers. Maybe it's a little bit too extreme, but I tell you an interesting story. There's a guy who decides where to draw a line, where you can build and where you cannot build. His life is in danger if he does it wrong. Because with just one line, you can make land extremely well value or almost useless. Based on this, Action Field 2 is working on actions, split it into different levels. From the macro level, so the regional level, for regional planners, geographers and urban planners, to urban designers, the meso level, the neighborhood level, down to the building level, which are basically about your work, the architects. And as I said before, of course, the growing population is asking for a growing amount of houses. So the number of houses which has to be constructed is rising extremely, as you can see in this diagram. And where do they go? As I said, they go into the wetlands, into quite dangerous areas, which are very sensible and sensitive, because it's a very important ecological, biodiverse environment, but they are basically bulldozed, and landfilling landfill will produce new building areas. It's still under construction. And this picture is already old, because all these gaps between the buildings are filled up. It's an extremely fast development which is going on in these neighborhoods of Saigon South. And this is a very typical typology, the so-called townhouse, the typology we are focusing on. Okay, now I would like to dive into a more detailed part where we can see connections to what I've presented in the first part of this presentation. The objectives for us architects working on the housing level are three. First, we do consulting to the local government and the nationwide government in terms of policies and guidelines, which of course cooperate also certification systems. Secondly, and this is somehow our main focus, because we were asking which tool of communication might be the right one in order to reach people. Otherwise, as I said, it's all above the heads of everyday people. And if we like it or not, 97% of architecture around the world is done without architects. This means whatever we talk here, nobody is interested in different countries, of Latin America, of Africa, of Asia, of Russia. They don't even think about hiring an architect, because it's just a house. What's the problem? Just build a house. So how do these people get information? Where do they get it from? In Vietnam it's very simple. They just go into the bookshop and buy a magazine, and they order a house they like. I would like to have this house with this furniture, this kitchen. And then they deliver. No architect. Just a developer who is interested in maximum profit. That's it. And our main idea was, okay, let's enter this game. we develop a magazine which is printed not thousands, but thousands times, and which are going into everyday bookshop, which is this one. Very cheap. Of course, it's somehow subsidized, but you can find it everywhere in every ordinary bookshop or newspaper store. And of course, having a prototype here and there makes sense, but we should not overestimate the prototype. We have these wonderful prototypes in Darmstadt. Yes, they are nice and they give very big image. But do not think that in a mega city like Saigon, people come to your pavilion and say, oh well, that's nice, I want to have the same. It's a matter of communication. So these have been the different steps. In the beginning, in 2008, we had a kick-off meeting. Then we developed a theoretical framework. And the second step was a very careful analysis of housing typologies and how people behave, how people use, what are the demands of the people who live in these houses. Then we started to develop concepts, which went into a quantitative development, and we worked on the catalog, different catalogs in 2011 and 12, and now more or less the project is coming to the end and is handed over to other people. We focused on the building and the neighborhood level, and not, at least my work package, not so much on the regional level. However, of course, we have been fed with information from our colleagues in this work package. We analyzed traditional villas. You can, by the way, learn a lot from the French colonial time, semi-detached villas, and also condominiums. But we saw quite fast, in order to get started, that more than 70% of all buildings in the residential sector, I'm not talking about office buildings or stuff like this, more than 70% are tube houses or row houses or shop houses. They have different names. So if you focus on this typology, there's probably a good chance in order to, maybe at the end of the day, to reach something on the megacity level. First we developed concepts, very simple, with land filling. The topic here is flooding, land filling, existing building structure, new building structure, floating, and some crazy ideas, just to test the limits. The second one here is about shading, which is an important issue, of course also in your context, no doubt. And by the way, I was talking about pavilions this morning. This is one of the pavilions which won a few years ago the so-called Solar Castle, the World Championship, which is launched by the US government. We are very proud of that in Darmstadt, because they won it twice and then they were excluded. They couldn't join the competition anymore. Okay, back to our process. So, of course, and this is probably an interesting exercise for you as well, maybe later in one of your design studios. So you go out and you ask people, for instance, how do you reach comfort in your house? Natural ventilation, air conditioning, air draft conducted by fan, and all these things. You need the information which are correct, not just like think about what you might imagine is correct for the people. You have to ask them how they behave. Or how do you use and when do you use air condition in major rooms of your house? It's about zoning. It's not just one big thing, it's about different zones. the colleagues of mine in Cottbus also developed a handbook which is on the neighborhood level, basically the level where we plug in with the houses. And we have 3 case studies, 2 which are a little bit north of the center, and 1 which is in a, as I said, very sensitive area, in an area called Nabe, a new town in the south. I don't want to go into this, just a glimpse of what I was talking about, that you might say it's not a good idea to settle in this area, but maybe there are solutions how to do it in a kind of compromise. And you can study these sort of settlements in different areas around the world. This always reminded me a lot of the early Mexico City settlement housing level, and introduce you quickly into this basically booklet, Handbook for Green Housing. And it says right in the beginning that it's about money. Sometimes I say in heaven money doesn't exist. If I might come into heaven, I don't know, I hope so. But in my everyday business, it's all about money. And you will see it in your future as well. It's all about money. So also in this booklet, it's about money. If you don't convince someone to save money, so they say, yeah, it's nice, but I probably won't do it. So people need to know that they save money with whatever you present. I don't want to go too much into this. I just want to show you some pictures, but I want to show you the content of the project. So first we give an introduction about how to save energy and how to do intelligent design. So in this case, if you are well educated and if you know how to design a sustainable building, the client doesn't have to pay $1. And he's really happy that you are his architect. So this doesn't cost anything, just good education. The third point is about sun protection and shading. The fourth is about ventilation and cooling. Then we talk about, in this chapter, about intelligent building, envelope construction, about solar heating. The use behavior is very important, efficient equipment, methods, and environmentally friendly buildings, flooding prevention, and then we have some do's and don'ts. And all this is then backed up with research, which is in the back of this part, because it's the foundation of this product, but people basically, they don't want to know this research stuff. They want to know what can I do exactly when I buy a house, a new house, or maybe they have already a house and they just want to know a little bit about solar heating. So you have to consider this as a menu. You don't have to do all of it. You can do just 1 or 2 things. So this is an introduction, and we are working with some symbols in order to make it more attractive for people, readable, and it still, I guess, can be improved, maybe less text, I don't know. And we dive into the design principles, orientation, wind, supported with computational models by this colleague who is a civil engineer in energy design, as I mentioned in the beginning. And so we have all these different issues of intelligent design, different zonings, and so on. Sun protection and shading, the third point, with different cases. which lead you basically, if you press one of these buttons, this is also online, to more detailed information. Ventilation and cooling, intelligent facades and roof with urban agriculture for herbs and vegetables, giving hints and reference projects, pictures to different points in the house, different technologies, and all these technologies are always ranked into low technology, medium technology and high technology, because at the end of the day it's important that it's affordable. It doesn't make sense to introduce complex systems. Yes, we do it, but we also have simple systems which are affordable for people. This is about water, storage below the base, which is also not new. It's basically a copy of the French colonial villas. You just have to study the history and suddenly you see it's quite efficient. Yes, this is just an image of like all the studies which are behind these somehow simple images. Here you can see with different graphs, just by changing maybe a single glass with a double glass, you can reduce, save this amount of energy. Having a more or less sealed, controlled ventilation with no openings, which are done because of the wrong building system. You can save much more. And maybe if you have a little bit of, and this is quite simple technology, with a heat converter system, you can save a lot of energy. Okay, this is my last slide. And you see, this is where I'm from. This is Frankfurt area. And sometimes people don't understand that the climate is changing, but in maybe 30 to 40 years, our climate will be a little bit different. We will have the same climate as we have in Florence or Rome. So we have to be prepared and see that we are not overwhelmed by the changing environment. Thank you very much.